I'm going to talk about improvement, what that means, and my thoughts. I have 3 options for you. Oh, for the nails. Black or black white, red, I think light blue, and pink is what I said earlier. You had mentioned black. Hey, welcome, Fox Rider. Thank you. We're about to have a little discussion about what it means to improve as a writer, since we just finished our poetry analysis for today. So, the first poem I ever wrote was around March 2023, and you wrote till like July of that year. Sure. Kind of stopped writing poetry and writing in general. Had the idea for a book around February this year, but only started writing again around September, oddly enough. So, a combined about 7 months of focused writing, though with a break in between. Yes, we're back from the yes. Okay. Fox Writer, improve as a writer in this economy? No, we just have to write cheap work and sell it that we don't love. We don't actually want to improve our writing. So, Pinguino Man, first of all, the fact that you've been writing for 7 months combined is pretty incredible, given like what you've been sending me. But I actually don't think it's, oops, dropped a coin. Maybe it's not actually that incredible, because I think so many people have really, 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 really good ideas to be put into art. I think there are a lot more artists out there, or potential artists, than people who actually make art. And when I started writing, like, people were saying like, wow, your things are really good, you're improving fast. And I felt a lot of validation from that, because I was like, wow, I'm new, I'm like this person who's writing cool stuff, and it's great. Honestly, I never feel like I'm improving until I go back and read something I wrote years ago, and I'm like, oh yeah, I see it now. That. And the thing is, I have been writing poetry for a year and 2 months. Right? I am not someone who's been writing poetry for her whole life. I'm not someone who has been, I wasn't doing youth poetry competitions and submissions and all these things. I didn't like English class until college, right? And then I dropped out of that. And I would say every time you write, you improve dramatically. Especially if you're writing something new. I mean, if you're not writing something that pushes you, if I'm writing my daily poem that I put on Twitter, I don't think I'm improving very much at all. Right. But I do think if you push yourself in new directions, if you take this poem, which is probably one of the most inflammatory things you've written about, like, religion, that and the one before, and then, like, those kinds of things, those teach you how to write. And the fact that I see you doing different things, at least from what you've already sent me, means I know you're improving. Also, the fact that you are writing things that I think are very strong writing, and saying, I'm not really sure if I want to show this on stream, shows to me that you're writing to improve, because you're looking at your own work and you're being critical. And you say, I don't know if I really like this one, but I'm going to send it to you. And that was When God Burns, and I like that poem a lot. Yes, we had a lot of critique for it, because you have a lot of ways to go, but it's hard, right? Honestly, I'm writing horror ask for the first time, and I feel I'm really improving a lot more than if I'm just throwing more unicorns at the wall. Exactly. Exactly. And you should go back in our YouTube playlist, the Poets of Twitch playlist, and look at some of Penguino Man's writing, because Penguino Man is a really good horror writer. I find it inspiring. We have a YouTube playlist of all the VODs from submissions. Basically, since you're new here, people submit their poetry to me. I read it. I give analysis. I give critique. Right? And we were reading Penguino Man's just before you came in, and now we're talking about improvement. But it's also really hard to look poem to poem and say, like, this one is better than the other. Because, like I said about your poems, different poems do different things, right? And there's also, yeah, admitting that there are parts, and even if the reaction to the poems are great, I should deconstruct it and see where I can constantly improve, I guess. Yeah, and that's why I say critique everything, right? If you learn to critique Charles Bukowski and Shakespeare and everyone you read, if you learn to critique Dostoevsky and you read Dostoevsky and say, I don't like this part. I know I'm giving you a lot of like white person examples, but whatever. You get the idea. Critique everything. Critique the greats. It's going to help you critique yourself, because you know if you can critique them, you know that your own work can be better, right? It's easy to fall into a rut in the road, stuck in the same plots, the same ideas you've already done. Trying new things is always really good. And I feel like I'm there right now, which is why I find it hard to talk about improvement myself. I don't feel like I'm doing very much new. Admittedly, the new thing is, for me, doing this on Twitch. I'm improving as a writer in ways that I never would have just by writing and reading, by being on Twitch. So again, that's probably me not acknowledging a point of improvement that, like, I have. Also, there's a really, like, bad glare coming through the window, reflecting off of, that's a roll of paper towels. That's not like a reflective surface, like, reflecting there, that light, that's a paper towel roll, which is like being illuminated by God right now or something. So I'm just gonna move it. That's why. See, paper towels. So oh no, God, I'm sorry. I promise it's just a poem. You're amazing. What's just a poem? Anyway, but I think you can see a lot of, like, improvements poem to poem. Sure, you can say I did this thing differently, I took this advice, but to look at broad quality of poems, sometimes it's really hard, and it does take, like, going back over a long time. And admittedly, I still feel strongly that, like, one of the best poems I have written, yeah, all writing is subjective, one of my best poems I wrote, it was maybe like the 6th poem I wrote ever, right? A year ago. But also I go back and look at poems that I hated back then and think they're better than I thought, which makes improvement really weird, right? And I look at poems now and I don't feel that a lot of my poems are like bangers, right? Because I feel like kind of stylistically lost, but I'm sure going back, I mean, I bet I was lost back then, as lost in my writing that as I am now, and that's just sort of part of my writing. I struggle, right, with finding something to write about as direction. Personal taste is also an ever shifting, changing thing. Yeah, and one of my best poems, the poem, something that I may be most proud of, Miserere, is a poem that I wrote 10 months ago, 11 months ago, right? And that doesn't mean that everything since then has been me not improving, because I haven't written something better, or that I think is better, right? Because the poems that you write, sometimes writing a quote unquote like great poem is just an anomaly. And you can write something amazing and then go back to writing a bunch of nonsense, and then sometimes an amazing thing pops out. That's why we write. Mary Oliver's most famous poem, I don't remember the name, but I heard about this like on a podcast interview. She said she wrote that poem as an example for a friend on how to write with a specific form. It's in a podcast somewhere. On Being is the podcast. She says that. And that's how you realize that, like, improvement and quality isn't about just, oh, I wrote the best poem I've ever written, that means I'm at my best writing. No. It means you had a moment of inspiration. And sometimes those come, sometimes they don't. And that's like a reality of it. And oftentimes when you're new, you are going to be inspired a lot. I felt this when I had just started. I was always writing. It was new. It was exciting. Everything felt like I can see the world with poetry. I can apply poetry to religion. I can apply poetry to math. I can apply poetry to my personal struggles. I can apply poetry to family, right? And then it gets old, right? And then you feel like your poetry is less original. And I have like another more recent poem similar to my work Miserere, which is like a super heavy, powerful religious poem. And I don't like it that much because I feel it does the same thing that Miserere did. It writes a religious poem, right? Which is probably nonsensical. So, and I'm definitely a better writer. I know more tools, I know more techniques, I understand more about how to write something that sounds good, Bukowski's Bim Bim Bim, and I have inspiration from people and an audience, and I write more. I'm writing more than ever, I would say. But improvement, I don't think, is about the poems. It's about like the person. I'm at my poetic best right now because I share poetry with people 4 times a week on Twitch, and my art twice a week, and I play games and talk about poetry while doing that twice a week, and I inspire other people to write. But that's not writing great poems. Even though it's my highest point so far as a quote-unquote poet. I'm not published, but that's not, like, the goal right now. So, improvement is about goals, sometimes. What you want to get out of your writing. Do I want to write the best poem? And if right now it's about writing the absolute best thing for you, like best work, then it's going to be hard to see improvement because those things can pop out of nowhere. But you are clearly learning new ways to express yourself in your work, and I would say that is pushing you, Penguino Man, toward your goal of writing a better poem. And I kind of presume that's a goal of yours, if only because you asked me to rank them, right? So improvements are a really hard thing, and there are multiple ways to improve. You did your first open mic a few days ago, right? And you said it didn't go as well as you had hoped. But you did something new, and you learned a lot from that, and that will not only inform the way that you speak poetry in the future, but the way you write it, and you'll realize that. And the more you do that, so have you improved? Yes, you did that. Have you improved? Yes, you've improved because you've sent me more poems. But to put a metric to it, to try to point toward improvement is really hard. Because metric improvement doesn't really exist. Right? We say improvement is non-linear, and every day that goes by where I don't feel like I'm improving in the actual language of my poetry, I realize that. Every time that I stream, I realize that progress is a weird thing, right? So it's good, because it means that you can decide what is progress for you, and you should decide what you're looking for in terms of progressing as an artist. If you don't know how you want to get better, it's hard to get better. And then you should judge that yourself. And create that structure. So right now, being a better artist for me is making Twitch the best, most inspiring thing I can. It's finding guests for what is going to be a podcast streamed on Twitch soon. I've been emailing other streamers, cold, reaching out to people, non-writing streamers who write poetry on their own, and I'm gonna bring them on my channel, and we're gonna do Twitch stream together, and it's gonna be like this thing to introduce new people to poetry, and poetry as a thing on Twitch, right? These things. Will is not gonna be like a early guest on the Poets of Twitch podcast. People you've never heard of, people I had never heard of until I went on Twitter and looked up poetry and Twitch. So these, that's progress for me. And occasionally I write like a decent poem, Bread and Wine. I don't even know what I've written recently. Friend Rival is a good one. Finished Train Track Confessional, and I don't like it. In My Head, New Humility. Like, I've written some good things lately, but I think the goal has changed. And at first, I was really excited about trying to write the best poem. So when I wrote my poem, Singularity, and it was the best, most complex, amazing, tasty sounding poem, and I still think it's one of my best poems. That's what I was focused on, so I remember that as one of my best poems. And I might have best poems that I've written recently, but my goal hasn't been to write the perfect poem anymore, right now. And so, I'm not noticing if I've written anything incredible, which is like weird. Weird? It's very weird. So try not to ask other people, I would say, for your own sake, to indicate your progress to you, because they don't know what you want, right? I can assume that you want to write a really good poem right now because you basically told me that, but no one knows your broader goals. No one knows the context of your life like you do. So don't allow anyone else to define success as a poet, because the world as a whole loves to define things wrong, especially in terms of success, because the world around us tells us success is monetary. Success is opportunities and jobs and connections and these things, and it leaves out a lot. Success can look like, as a poet, as anyone, taking a break and not writing anything for a month. As hard as that sounds, right? And that would be progress, because it's growing as a person and as an artist. So try to find your own compass of value within yourself and let that guide you. Don't let someone else saying this poem is better than this one you're improving guide you. You can take it as praise. Absolutely. I do think you're improving, Pinguino Man. But it's more nuanced than looking at 4 poems and seeing that. So that's the thing, right? And maybe before we raid out, I can leave you all with a poem of mine that might relate to that. That sound good? I need to find one. I might just do my prayer. Yeah, I'll leave you all with a poem. What's the likelihood of me joining the workshop in 2 hours? I'll try to be there if I don't forget. I know it's linked on. You can send me the link. Yeah, please do. I'll try to be there. Learning is good. And I just talked a lot about improvement, so I should go take an action to like meet people and improve myself, right? But here is my, in parentheses, my prayer. And I read this a few streams ago amongst some of my other quote-unquote religious poems. It's short, and then we'll raid out. Let your words be your God. Believe in them. Preach them. Sing your song to the world, because nobody will listen. Because their silence makes you feel alone, it always will. So don't. Listen for them. Listen inside. Find those sacred words. Sorry about the dogs. Kind of loud. And when you do, raise your voice until they are deaf and you are hoarse. Until they echo longer than any God. My prayer.